Hi, folks. Welcome to Leadership and Innovation Unlocked with Inclusive Collective, where we bring you news and analysis of the latest in people and workplace culture and share stories and learnings of leaders and organizations driving performance and innovation through inclusion. I'm your co host, Nadia Butt, a workplace culture strategist and talent development consultant. And I am here always with my very good friend, Rob Hadley, a people and culture strategist specializing in operational excellence, transformations, and analytics. Hey, Rob, welcome back this
Dr.
week.
Nadia Butt. Come
I know.
on, you
It's
forgot.
funny. I did forget. I was thinking, oh, I didn't say that, but like, really, do we need to? But welcome back this week. I hope you had a good, hearty week of Thanksgiving.
Oh wow, it's like getting through the other side of it, right? You're like,
I
woo,
like still recovering from
yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah, right,
of
yeah.
course.
Put on some weight. Put on a little weight.
Yeah. A
Yeah,
couple of pounds.
yeah.
But I had something happen this week that made me like irrationally annoyed.
Okay.
And it made me wonder if I'm alone, but I wanted to know from you, like, what's a tiny workplace annoyance that
Okay.
should be illegal?
Like something in the office, or just like.
Anything could be like with colleagues or like anything that happens that you're just like, oh my God, this is like they're so annoying.
We're gonna talk about some, like being an office experience. We're gonna talk a little bit, later in the
Yeah.
program. So I haven't been
Right.
in an office for many years. But the
Right.
thing that jumps out, like when you mentioned this, was the local elevator joke, like when you're on the elevator in the building that I was in,
Okay. Yeah.
where like as soon as several people hit a button or a floor that you're going to, and
Yeah.
someone's like, "Oh, are we on the local?" Like they're
Oh, they
that
like try to make a joke or
yeah,
something?
yeah, that's
Oh,
like
that's so
the
annoying.
local, yeah. So, and invariably they would do it like at least once a week. Someone would pull that. So I
Ew,
like,
that's
and to the
so.
point where I was really, really angry. What reminded you of
Oh,
this?
it was like, okay, so I was having a discussion about performance reviews and how like I basically call it like performance review offenses, where it's like, you get feedback like you're doing really great, but we really need you to stretch more or like stretch you more, like it's like it sounds so positive, but it feels like such a setup and like it's just like the classic feedback whiplash. Like people are like, wait,
Well,
am I doing good?
you're supposed to do, like you're coached as a manager to give the sandwich, right? Like to,
Totally.
to do the compliment and then the,
And then
the,
the, like,
the
negative, but, like,
critique
the
and then the,
stretch is, like, we need to stretch you more, so I'm not obviously, I'm
the
not
word,
doing enough, so I don't understand
the
what's
word
happening.
stretch. Yeah. The
Yeah,
word stretch is like, I'm always like, I cringe a little bit when someone says stretch. So yeah,
totally.
totally with you on that. So, all
Yeah.
right, well, let's get into it today. Let's get into the old program that we do here
Yeah,
today on leadership
sure.
and innovation unlocked. We're going to talk about conservative women having children earlier, a Campbell soup exec diminishing the company's customers, and then we welcome guest Dana Weeks, host of the Rest of Us podcast, to talk about burnout and how we take care of ourselves at work, which is very timely at this point in the year. And then
Yeah.
later, a rare double rant from you and I, which I just realized is the opposite of a double rainbow. But
Oh,
but
yeah.
but first, let's get to the deets. What do you say, Nadia? Can I
Let's
interest
do it.
you in a
Mm,
story that I sent you about it was from the Wall Street Journal. It
sure.
was profiling several conservative women and their decision to start families early in their career. And we'll have the link up in our show notes. People should check it out. Like, there's so many problematic, rage baiting things in this. I
Oh,
don't know if
yeah.
you saw.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I saw it.
And
I read it.
the women were mostly affluent, partnered, in very privileged and very flexible jobs, and
Yeah.
they were given somewhat of a hero treatment, at least in the way that the article was laid out, for having kids earlier.
Yeah.
Very, very passing mention that they had the support, the wealth to have kids earlier, that they weren't trying to become doctors, where the demands of the training make it extremely difficult or
Sure.
impossible to do.
Mm-hmm.
Despite all that, Nadia,
Mm.
I found it interesting for two reasons. Want to get your reaction. One,
Sure.
I think it's interesting that there is this liberal and conservative divide in having kids uh, earlier, right? So the huge differences in people that are self-described as conservatives having kids earlier, and then people
Yeah.
that are self-described liberals not having kids, right, until later in their career.
Yeah.
And
Or just like even how they're depicted, right? Like how
well,
they are perceived or yeah.
yeah, yeah. But and then number two is that one of the companies owned by one of these women, had a core collaboration hours.
Mm.
So everyone had to be there at the office from like 9 to 2 in order to
Hmm.
account for, in this case, they were very focused on their child care responsibilities. But, I wondered if you thought that that could be a solution for other companies. So instead of return to office battles where the companies say, hey, be here 3 days a week, maybe
Yeah.
something like this could be useful where we say, hey, be at these targeted hours that we're all going to come together. But taking into consideration everyone has needs,
Yeah.
outside of the office. So those
Yeah.
are my two things. What did you take away from that
No,
article?
I mean, just to address sort of what you said, like, yes, and like, let's still have flexibility. Like, let's treat employees as if they're adults and offer, so there are some women that don't have children but have parental, like, right? Like, folks that they take care of their parents and so it's sort of like just have the flexibility in mind instead of setting these like rigid boundaries. But I read this article, I actually read this a while ago when it first came out. I think it was like a month ago, and there was a lot of maybe it was 3 weeks ago, I don't remember, but there was a lot of discussion about it, which I think is like what was prompting me to reread it. And yes, it's about conservative women choosing marriage and motherhood in their 20s, and kind of saving their career ambition for later on. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, not because women shouldn't make these choices, right? They absolutely should. That's like that, it gives you kind of that agency, but because framing it is so conservative and then minimizing. So
Mm,
I think it positions this as somehow the better, more meaningful path, and it subtly reinforces the idea that a woman's primary purpose is family
mm,
and not ambition or not agency. And then I think you're right, like you had mentioned, it completely kind of ignores the privilege and sort of those things. But there's also like that underlying systemic inequities, the economic realities you mentioned, that and the fact that women can and do contain multitudes of things, right? We
mm-hmm.
can build careers, we can have families, have these multitude of identities, right, on our own timelines.
Yeah.
And I felt like this article kind of reduced that complexity, and then it like really pushes this narrative that feels just like narrow, and it feels very regressive, and honestly just very out of touch of like the lives that I think most women are actually living, because I talk to most women,
Right.
and so yeah, it was just kind of another example of like a very conservative narrative.
Yeah, it is it's conservative newspaper writing the
Yeah.
article, and certainly like slanted in that regard. And so that's was, and so I 100% agree with that. And like I said, I like, what I thought about was there's this remote work is such an unlock for parents, but it's also an unlock for people with aging parents. I just worked with a company where I was working with a guy and changing his schedule,
Yeah.
and he had pets. And so he was like, well, I need to be, like I need to take care of my pets. And I was like,
Yeah.
cool, let's figure out a way to make this work.
Let's do
Or even
right.
young people have
Totally.
lives, and so maybe they have interests, and let's like they need to take care of other things that are happening. So I'm interested in that, the way that they had framed it as an alternative to mandating people to be there certain days of the week versus
Yeah.
the hours within those days. I thought that was interesting, and could be a solution
Yeah.
for other companies as well.
Totally could be, right? Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I thought that
Yeah,
was an interesting article to talk about and discuss.
cool. All right, what do you got for me?
All right. So, wild story this last week involving Campbell's Soup Company. Remember chicken noodle soup or like
Mm-mm,
cream of
good.
mushroom? I don't know.
Oh,
Good. That's
clam
right.
chowder.
Oh god. I don't.
That may be chunky. That may be
That's like
chunky.
so gross. so, so a senior executive at Campbell's was secretly recorded calling the company's products shit for poor people and mocking customers and employees, including racist attacks on Indian heritage staff and criticizing its own soups as bioengineered meat.
Mm.
So I read this article through The Guardian, and so apparently through other news articles, the exec is on leave. Some reports say that he's been fired. A lawsuit is underway. Really, it's kind of like a big mess, drawing up serious questions about corporate culture
Mm.
and racism. But love to know what if you had any thoughts about the article when you read it.
Yeah, I think at one point he said that the chicken was made in a 3D printer, which was
Yeah.
worse. Was the worst of an insult that I could come up with if I was trying to be as mean as possible about the fruit. And
Yeah.
by the way,
Yeah.
as a kid growing up in Colorado,
Yeah.
like what do you think? Where do you think I got my clam chowder? Right?
I mean, that's true. That's
Like
true. But I mean,
that's a
and
little,
I had,
you're
I
literally looking down
had,
on those of us that live with we never saw an ocean.
that's true. And like, I had chicken noodle soup growing up, like
Yeah,
Campbell's.
yeah,
I've been to some friends' houses that still have
yeah,
Campbell's in their
yeah.
pantry. So like, come on.
I mean, I think so. Look, I imagine this person does fairly well, right? So to me, it's just another example of the disconnect that we see, the inequality. Like we're definitely not all in this together. There's inequality that people can think of others this way or talk about or disparage others, even the customers, the people that actually pay their salaries and allow them to do well.
Yep.
I thought about this in the context of someone was talking about the mayor election in New York City, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what context it was, but what they said was that politics are not so much about left and right, but more about these days about top versus bottom. And so this
Ooh,
seems like
yeah.
another example of that. From a
Yeah.
company perspective, like if you're Campbell's Soup, this is a crisis. And so I would really lean into it and ramp up the advertising, focus on the quality of the ingredients, right? So if I'm communicating internally to my employees, I would want to build pride in the fact that the product is inexpensive. And this
Right.
is a time when people are struggling, when prices are going up everywhere.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
want my employees to be proud that they provide a delicious quality product for an affordable price. I
Mm-hmm.
would fully go after this and communicate, and I would invest in, as much advertising. I would invest in internal communications as well. Because like I said,
Yeah.
like it's a cultural thing that you could see,
Mm-hmm.
that you could see or people could talk about it like this.
Yeah.
And I would make sure that that would be completely unacceptable. And like I said, I would try to build pride around the products that we're providing for people.
Yeah. I would agree. I feel like it's a cultural rot. Like I don't know how else to explain it, but you mentioned some things like it's to me this is leadership failure, right? It really is entitlement, it's elitism,
Mm.
it's racism. It actually shows you how disconnected some executives are from the people
Oh,
who make the kind of make the business run, and then the customers who buy the products, or even their employees. And so the fact that this was said so casually, it just tells you everything about the culture, like you said, and that it's enabled, right?
right, right.
um so just thought it was an interesting
And it came to
story.
light through a person, I don't know if it's whistleblowing is the right term, but coming out and speaking out against it. And so I think it's a good
Totally.
thing that it came out. And like I said, if I were Campbell's, I'd use it as an opportunity to strengthen the culture and then try to build that employee pride in what we're doing. So
No doubt.
thanks for that, Nadia. I'm glad you brought that one up. That is it for the deets this week. We're going to take a short break. Be right back with our conversation with Dana Weeks. Stay with us.
Welcome back, folks. This week on Leadership and Innovation Unlocked, we welcome Dana Tennille Weeks. Dana is the host of The Rest of Us, a podcast that explores rest as self-liberation for professionals and advocates who are burning out. She's also the founder of Thrive Architects, a strategic advocacy and professional development firm. And surprise, she's also a poet. Welcome, Dana. We are so excited to have you join us this week
I'm
on the
so
podcast.
excited to
How are
be
you
here.
doing?
I'm doing well. I'm thriving, y'all. I'm thriving.
Wonderful.
Dana, it's lovely to meet you. Thanks so much for joining us. I wanted to start with what's the state of burnout right now, right? So I feel like it's great to have you here because everyone I know is
Yeah.
burnt out, right? Like everyone you talk to, whether they're a leader, whether they're a frontline worker, whether they're a manager, they're completely burnt out. I'm worried about everyone I know. So to give us what's the state of, where are we at with, what is your sense of where we
Yeah.
are right now? And then, why do we have to have more attention on this in
Yeah.
workplaces?
So, what is interesting is burnout is actually a workplace phenomenon, and it is very common. In fact, it is so common that the World Health Organization has studied it and it has actually put out a
Hmm.
definition to help people understand what is going on. And so what is interesting about the World Health Organization's definition is one, it characterizes it where the responsibility for burnout it actually belongs to the workplace. So a lot of people are feeling, oh my goodness, why am I so burnt out? And they're doing all these things, which is important for them to take agency in that. But understand that if your ecosystem around you is not changing, burnout will still persist. The way that the World Health Organization also characterizes burnout, it does so in 3 ways. So one way is that you have this exhaustion and energy depletion that you always feel. And then the second way that people are really experiencing or seeing burnout as characterized by the World Health Organization is that there's a lot of mental distance between your job, a lot of negativism that they call it, and cynicism. You just you're becoming skeptical. You just want to distance yourself and find more and more boundaries that are actually becoming barriers to how you want to show up with a strong sense of self at work, especially. And then the third way that burnout is showing up and why it's so pervasive is because it's now undermining professional efficacy, meaning that people are no longer in a growth mindset. They're quiet quitting. People are making mistakes and all of this. And so what's interesting about all of this is that it is not unique, but people feel like it is a weakness of theirs if they talk about burnout, when in fact it's something that we need to talk about because it's a problem that needs to be resolved, particularly in the workplace.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, Dana, because as you're speaking, I'm like, yep, experience that, experience that, check, check, check. And burnout, I feel like, is often framed as an individual issue. But as you're mentioning, like, we should be speaking at it sort of at that organizational level. And I'm curious from your research and your perspective, how can leaders proactively address that? And then, like, almost in some sense, like, what are the signs that they should be looking for, or what are some of those indicators for organizations that they should watch out for, that show that their employees are disconnected or that they are kind of burning
So
out?
I feel like that is a whole day discussion, which I know we do not have time for. But I think what I'll do is first start with a study that I found very interesting. So while the World Health Organization has characterized burnout as a workplace phenom, this study, my background is I was a lawyer lobbyist for 15 years. So I look also particularly within the legal industry a lot because burnout is there and lawyers are usually at the top of everything that is poor health quality and mental health quality for things. And what the study showed, it interviewed 2,000 lawyers, and with their responses, they categorized their responses into 3 groups. The first group, the question was, does your employer value you, your inherent value? Do you feel like your employer values you, your inherent value? What does your employer see about you? Group 1 responses were, my employer sees my inherent value, or I show up to work and my inherent value, and that's enough. Group 2 responses were, my value is actually tied to accessibility, responsiveness, productivity. That's what my employer sees. When my employer sees that, then that's what they value. And then the third group was, my employer doesn't see nothing. Absolutely nothing. I get no feedback. I don't know where I am. I'm dazed and confused all the time. So needless to say that in the first group, when you did the overlay of burnout, in the first group, there were higher levels of mental health in the first group, where inherent value was, the person was grounded in their inherent value at work. For the second group, the mental health levels were worse. And for the third group, they were the worst. And so what that shows is that while there is this whole idea of workplace phenom, how people navigate the workplace and how they're viewed in the workplace, the more that they're inherently tied, the more that they're closely tied to their inherent value, the less likely they are to burn out. Now, here's the thing. Everybody gets tired. Everyone gets exhausted, but there's that perpetual exhaustion. So I think, one, it's first important to understand that as a leader, if you are not viewing your employees as human beings, instead of just another check mark or another number on the Excel spreadsheet, then in fact, you are contributing to a burnout ecosystem at work. But there are various signs for burnout, and I'll talk about a few here today. There are things like unmanageable workloads. There are things that I talk about as well, which is there's a disconnect in modeling. So there needs to be a model shift. So what the expectations are of the organization, those leaders are not modeling the very same thing. And so there becomes inconsistency. Or in fact, leaders are not acknowledging where their vulnerabilities are and asking for help so that people understand they're human too in the work. Another area is that there's no real team cultivation. And that is a big one, I think, for leaders. I think a lot of leaders do not think about how do I have honest conversations with my team to get them to their inherent value. So what that means is I have a definition of professionalism. The definition of professionalism is to approach your work with a true sense and responsibility of the truth and the realities of the work, with a deep sense of care, core competency, and then also at the pace at which the problem or work requires. The problem with professionalism is that most people award decorum over professionalism. And so when I talk about decorum, that's proving mindsets, pleasing mindsets, pretending mindsets. And when people are showing up in those mindsets and leaders are not calling them in to say, I don't need you to prove anything to me, let's just grow together and work together, that's also creating a culture of burnout when that does not happen. So those are so some drivers of burnout. Again, unmanageable workload. Another one is no team cultivation. Another one is modeling. There are a few more, but I'll stop there. And I'm happy to offer a little bit later, or right now if you prefer, questions that people can also ask themselves and reflect on when they're thinking, trying to identify, am I burning out, or how do I need to be attuned to my burnout?
Yeah, I love that, and can't wait to get to that. And maybe I'll ask some questions for myself, just like as we're here today. But so, of the things that you just mentioned, right? So, if you're in a workplace that doesn't see people as, where it's very common that leaders don't see people as people, or that the team aspect of it is off in some way. I feel, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, that sometimes burnout in organizations travels downhill, right? So, leaders burning out the manager burns out team members. So if I'm in an organization like that, like what are some strategies for either frontline worker, team member, and manager to create a workplace where the leader, how do you engage the leader so that becomes less?
So
of a
one of the
problem?
things that I encourage managers to do is oftentimes people assess people's workload based off of time or expertise, but they miss out on the component of mental capacity. And so usually when I used to work at the firm with our teams, when we would do our weekly prep meetings, one of the things I would encourage people to do, it was a 1, 2, 3 scale of mental capacity. Where are you at? And either people could say it at the meeting or they can email me. And we had definitions for the team. We came up with the definition of what a 1 looked like, basically, which is I'm fine, I'm high performing, I can work, and I can also make decisions well. 2 is that I have a lot on my plate, but I can still manage this. I'm at the point where it's a nice equilibrium. 3 is if you give me one more thing, I do not have good judgment. I will not be able to have good judgment. I'm pretty much on the edge. I'm exhausted. And for those teams, and when that happens, either people could just email me 3, or they could just say 3 in meetings. And what that does is, as a manager, as I am advising clients, as I'm leading teams and I'm committing to a yes, I am now making a more informed yes to what I'm committing for when I'm advising clients. So if a client's like, can you get us a memo in 2 days? And I know the lead is at a 3 mental capacity, I may go to the client do you really need it in 2 days, or can I get it to you by like Monday of next week and we can talk it through together? Because now I'm creating the space and caring for the being of the person who is doing the work, not just being conscious of their time, but also their mental capacity, which is what is critically needed to get a high performing work product or service completed. So that is one way. Another way that people individually can do things so that it can prompt conversations about reprioritization or how we manage our resources differently is I tell people we often color code our calendars based on tasks. So yellow may mean travel, or green may mean I'm doing podcasts. But instead, I tell people to also think about color coding based on their energy levels. So if, for example, I love public speaking. I love engaging with human beings, but I am, surprising to some people, a deep introvert. So while I love it, it actually exhausts me by the time I'm done, when I'm in that moment, the time I'm done. So anytime I have a public speaking engagement, including like a podcast, it is red on my calendar when I have that, so that I know far out, even if the podcast or the speaking engagement is scheduled 3 months out, I know there is time before or after where I may just need to decompress. Also, what I see from my calendar is if I have a week where it's like 4 reds, that already tells me about my mental energy by the end of the week, how I need to prepare, how I need to moderate it, or how I need to care for myself and recover by the end of the week. The other reason why I think that's important is because when you see something like red or green, for me is deep think time, so things like that. When you see red, you can now start proactively have conversations with people about how you're approaching your work, because you're not just thinking about time or tasks, you're actually thinking about my actual capacity, the mental energy that I can bring to this work. And so if you see 2 things 3 weeks out that are red and someone says, hey, can you do this? It's due in 3 weeks. You can look and go, maybe I cannot. Maybe I could do it the week before, or maybe I can do it afterwards. And now you're proactively managing your mental health a little bit better from the calendar.
I love those tips. In my head, I'm like, I'm going to start that. I'm going to start that on Monday. I love those tips. And, kind of just a final question for you, because I'm just so curious about your observations of the organizations that you feel maybe have gotten that right, or even individuals that have really started to practice and put their well-being and, prioritizing kind of their mitigating their burnout. What do you see as the impacts to the organization in the long run?
Great question. So one of the things that I work on with organizations is how we shift from performative cultures. And so when we do when we think about performative cultures, these are organizations where results are prioritized over the how. And if you're not focused on the how of the work as a leader, then you are actually missing out on the nuance of what you need to be addressing and how you need to be addressing it. So with organizations that I find that do this well, they're actually recognizing not just the results of what their teams are doing, they are actually recognizing how people are approaching the work, which helps to preserve integrity. It helps to focus on clarity in the work. And it also helps for people to grow. Because now we're having conversations about how are you doing this? What does this look like relative to something else, as opposed to just results? What I also find is that people are now more committed to the work. They do the work actually in less time because they're growing constantly and continuously with a nuanced understanding of how to approach things. And they also feel confident in the judgment in doing so. And so people are not leaving work second guessing themselves. People are also not leaving work as feeling like I'm the only one who's overcommitted and doing work for everyone else while they're off below the radar, right? Because we're focusing on the how of things. So it also creates a lot more trust within the work environment. And then the last thing I'll say is it also creates a well for honesty where people they don't have to overshare what they're doing, but they're willing to be human, which for some of us we call vulnerability. They're willing to be human to talk honestly about how they're feeling about something because they know as a group, we're looking out not only for the best interests of the work product we're doing, but ourselves. So let's figure it out because I am actually a team player and I need to be healthy in showing up each time. So I think those teams that do it well, don't get me wrong, they'll be tired because we are human beings. But the cohesion, the camaraderie, that team cultivation is there, and it's rooted in a true sense of what I defined as professionalism. Again, the truth with a deep sense of care, competency, and at the pace at which it needs to be addressed.
Wow. I love it.
That's great. That's great.
It is. It's. Did you have a final question, Rob?
Yeah.
Really
So
get a
now
reaction.
I want to know. So what are the signs that I'm burnt out and I'm not just having a bad week or a bad month or
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
Give me those.
So I had
what am
a
I looking
severe
for?
breakdown. I burned out beyond burnout in 2020. And so some of the signs I'll share from that experience are also signs that are true to burnout. One is that you are in survival mode, which means that everything you're telling yourself is I have to do it or else there's a consequence in your mindset. Another is that you're constantly second guessing yourself. Second guessing actually becomes the first thought you have in your decision-making matrix. And so you're constantly thinking about what if this, what if that, what if that. Your body is reacting as if everything is a potential threat and not an opportunity for growth. Along the same lines, there's a lot of overthinking, over-planning, over-committing. We are at 100%, and 100% is our maximum. So when you feel like you need to do 120, 130 to get things right, that's not actually a sign of courage or a sacrifice or a badge of honor. It's actually a sign of sacrifice. You're sacrificing yourself. The other is I had erratic sleep patterns. And so I would be too tired that I couldn't sleep. But when I would sleep, it was like napping roulette. I never knew when I would wake up. And then when I'm supposed to go to bed, I can't go to bed. It's just erratic sleep patterns because your body, the cortisol levels are so high that your body, the circadian rhythm is not there. It's not set within your body. The other is that you actually are showing up with health signs that you know are not normal for your body, but you just accept it anyway. It's a sign, another sign of burnout. And then the last sign I'll say is that you become a cynic to almost everything. Or you are so doubtful of everything that you start withdrawing from the world as well. Those are all signs of burnout.
Well,
that's a happy note.
Sounds like
any of those ring true, Nadia? Nadia, any of those?
I mean, several, and they continue. And I think it's just such a good reminder for individuals and leaders to really look out for these signs and to discuss it. I think the conversation is not being had amongst colleagues and amongst teams. And I think it's such an important conversation when it's impacting productivity and, quite honestly, it's impacting individual health. Yeah. And so
can I just say one more thing about that? I'll just say for leaders, one way that you can proactively start to address burnout before it happens or deepens is identify when your staff, and I said this before, but I want to emphasize it, is in proving, pleasing, or pretending mode. When people feel that they have to go outside of their inherent value to show you your value is when people are going to burn out. And so one of the things I encourage leaders to do is to find ways of calling in people so that they can show up in their inherent value. What I mean by that, and I'll end with this, what I mean by that is, so say, for example, you see someone who's pleasing, so they refuse to ask questions or they refuse to give an alternative opinion in a brainstorming session. And you know that person has something to say. What you do is you go, I welcome all opinions. I have valued your opinions in the past. Do you have anything to add, even if you disagree with me, because it will make this experience better. And that is a way of calling someone in when you see that they're in pleasing mode or pretending mode. And that helps them then show up with their inherent value, which, as I showed or said before, that study shows that when people are attached to their inherent value, there are better signs of mental health.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. Dana Weeks, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership and Innovation Unlocked this week. It was such a great conversation, and we hope that you'll come back because there's definitely more to discuss. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back for our Reflections and Raves and Rants.
Welcome back, everyone. We just finished chatting with our guest, Dana Weeks. Nadia.
Yes.
Do you have any takeaways from our lovely chat with Dana?
So many. How wonderful is she? Listening to her really hit me in a different way. Like, we talk about, not we, but like society talks about burnout so casually. Like, it's just part of being a professional. It's part of being a leader, right? It's part of being human. Or maybe it's even more centered around like the Western world. It's just like part of like how we work. But I think what struck me most about our conversation with Dana is her reminder that burnout isn't a personal failure. It's a workplace issue, right? We put so much pressure on individuals to fix their own burnout. But if the systems and the expectations around them don't shift, then I don't think anything changes. And I just, I just love that point of view. And she also talked about like those inherent values, like people burn out when their worth is tied only to productivity and responsiveness instead of being seen as, as human beings first. And that just really resonated with me as well. Right. So, a lot of the signs that she named kind of hit home, or close to home, I should say. And I think that's really the point, is like naming the burnout really helps us actually address it for ourselves and then also for our teams.
For sure.
So really just great conversation with her.
For sure. Like I said, everyone I know is burned out or has been burned out. And I've gone through this, a few times in my life as well. And so, great advice, and really excited to have that conversation. And it really does seem to hit at the end of the year. So happy. Hopefully
it does.
People can take care or take something away from that conversation.
Absolutely. And it's the end of the year, but it's also this year with a lot of moving pieces with current administration and just, workplace agitations and so forth. So, yeah.
Luckily, 2026 is going to be awesome. So,
everything is awesome.
It's going to be great. All right. We're going to do.
What do we got next?
We're going to do double rants.
We're going to do double.
I hate to talk too much about these folks, but one of the lesser known features of the One Big Beautiful Turd that Congress passed this year is taking effect, which is to cap federal loan limits for graduate study at significantly lower levels and to narrow what is considered a professional degree. Some of the roles that are no longer deemed professional include nurses, physician assistants, physical therapists, speech therapists, accountants, architects, educators, and social workers. This will push those that do not have the means to take out private loans, which is a huge win for their buddies in the financial services industry, or will make the cost of that education prohibitive. So just note that these are primarily roles that are dominated by women. They're essential community roles. Ultimately, this will drive up the cost of everything. We talked about, we always come back to the cost of childcare, elder care, things like that, social services. There'll be much more scarcity in these type of workers, to say nothing about the lack of community services. So, again, well done for the folks that are in charge.
Yeah. Rant away. We shall. Oh my gosh. Well, my rant this week is about the Coast Guard, and it's revised its policy on swastikas, nooses, and bullying. So
Sure.
so the US Coast Guard quietly drafted a policy that would have downgraded those items and other kind of hate symbols to just potentially divisive, like, so basically removing them from the category of explicit hate imagery. And there was public outrage and pressure from lawmakers. And I believe that they had reversed course and reinstated a full ban. I just have to double check on that, but that was kind of what I was reading in the newspaper. So, of course, like, this whole thing is just like outrageous, right? Like, to deem that these symbols are not divisive. They are tools of terror, they are tools of violence. And the fact that this is even considered, I think, shows like a very dangerous willingness to sanitize hate.
Mm.
And it's just like deeply alarming that this is what we're like willing to do. And I consider the US Coast Guard an organization where people are serving and working, and it's just quite scary, to be quite frank.
Nothing to add. I didn't even think
Yeah.
it was real when I was like, are we're really having this conversation?
I can't even,
You can't do anything with it. So
not making it up.
So yeah. So maybe we shouldn't do double rants anymore.
Way to end this episode on a high.
Okay. But it's always great to see you.
Always.
The Leadership and Innovation Unlocked is a production of Inclusive Collective Media and edited by Ari Mathey. We would love to hear from you. We keep saying that. Please send us whatever comments or feedback you have at inclusivecollectivepodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and follow us, rate us, and wherever you get your podcasts, please share us with your friends. Again, thanks to Dr. Nadia Butt and our guest, Dana Weeks. We're going to see you in 2 weeks on December 16th. Everyone stay well.
Be well.